Good evening, everyone. Our guest tonight is William Stern. He's a native of Los Angeles and has enjoyed a life of public service. He holds a degree in economics from the University of California at Berkeley. Yes, my daughter goes there. And a master's in business administration from the University of USC. From 1991 to 1998, Mr. Stern served as a revenue agent for the Internal Revenue Service in Los Angeles, conducting audits of individual, partnership, trust, corporation, and complex domestic and international transactions. In January 1999, Mr. Stern transitioned from audit to investigation and embarked on a 20-year career as a special agent with the FBI. During that time, Mr. Stern served in Honolulu, San Francisco, Washington, West Palm Beach, London, Las Vegas, and The Hague. With experience over the course of his career as an investigator, manager, executive, and diplomat, Mr. Stern worked or managed virtually all investigative and administrative programs under the purview of the FBI. This experience includes public corruption, complex financial crimes, governmental fraud, civil rights violent crimes, cybercrime, national security matters, and financial and personal management. Mr. Stern is a recipient of the Attorney General's Award for Distinguished Service. Retiring from the FBI in January of 2019, Mr. Stern now continues his public service in the capacity of Inspector General for the Los Angeles Unified School District. Mr. Stern maintains several relevant professional designations and is a certified fraud examiner, certified information security manager, certified protection professional, and certified Inspector General. Additionally, Mr. Stern currently serves as the president of the Association of Inspector General Western State Chapter. Wow, as I told you, I had to read all that because we were so impressed by your credential. It sounds like you had a very interesting career. You've seen it all. And welcome to our show.
Mr. Stern, you're what we would call a triple threat. FBI, IRS, LAUSD, watch out.
Well, I hope you'd see it as a triple asset or protector for our kids, because
yes,
that's what I care deeply about. That's what I enjoy as Inspector General at LA Unified, is serving and protecting our kids in LA.
That's right.
Happy to be on your program and speak to some of the issues for sure.
Can you explain to our viewers a little bit what is that position entails?
Sure. As the Inspector General at LA Unified, I've been honored to hold it for the last 2 years. And basically, I'm over investigations and audits. So reporting directly to the Board of Education, I enjoy the responsibility of making sure that our monies go where they're supposed to go and our entrusted employees do as they are entrusted to do, as well as our vendors and contractors.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Mr. Stern, we want to welcome you today to Yentas in the City. We're so happy to have you here, and we thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today and discuss the important topic of child exploitation. For our viewers, child exploitation is the act of using a minor child for profit, labor, sexual gratification, or some other personal or financial advantage. Child exploitation often results in cruel or harmful treatment of the child, as the activities he or she may be forced to take part in can cause emotional, physical, and social problems. Our usual format is to go right into questions, but today we decided to change the format and have Mr. Stern discuss the subject. And once we hear him address our viewers with his vast knowledge, we'll go straight into questions. If that's okay with you, Mr. Stern, we'd like to proceed with you speaking about all your knowledge.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for creating this platform in order to discuss such an important topic. Protecting our kids is protecting our future. What I'd like to do is kind of go through what human trafficking is, and then the subset of that with the child and child sex trafficking, and then give maybe some red flags, some indicators that your audience can look for, and then finally give some reporting contact information. So if people do see something that hits some of these indicators, they have a place to go, something to send that information, and then perhaps answer whatever questions you might have on the topic. Does that work?
Perfect.
Let's do it. So when we look at human trafficking and what that is, it's essentially the act of converting a person into property. That's what it is. You're either preparing and targeting that, you're in the act of doing it, or you've accomplished that and now you're treating a person as property. So that's really what we're talking about. When we look at human trafficking across the US, California has the highest stats, the highest numbers in the US. And that's troubling. And it's also important for us to realize, being in California, that it's a crime and that it's happening around us, and that we're each positioned to identify perhaps when this crime is occurring and report it when we see it. We see in California, across the US, when we look at the totality of forced labor, that we have 25 million people in that position. People who are either tricked or coerced into working in a forced way. 5 million of that 25 million is related to sexual activities. Of that 5 million, 70% are women and 30% are men. And this illegal industry is approximately $150 billion a year. So this is a massive thing that is happening around us. This isn't one or two instances. This isn't something the police can come in and arrest somebody and it's done. It is very pervasive across our country, across our state, across our city. It's a big problem to address. Of that 5 million, 1 million are kids, right? So you have an awful lot of children, defined as under 18, that are involved in the sex-related trafficking business. The illegal child sex trafficking business, which is very, very profitable. What we want to do is prevent traffickers. We want to prevent victims, and we want to identify and prosecute leaders and organizers. That's what we collectively want to do in order to do what we can to minimize the horrible effects of this problem. What we can do, each of us, is look for indicators. We can look for red flags. So what are they? Well, we look at when folks are living with or at an employer's. We look at poor living conditions. When you have multiple people sleeping in a room, minimized verbal and visual contact. When you walk by someone, they're looking down, they're looking away. When you do engage them, they have scripted answers, things that just don't look natural, where a person just doesn't look like they're enjoying basic freedoms that we all do. Identification or travel documents being held by somebody else, that's a big sign. Evidence of physical abuse. You see bruises, cuts, malnourishment. Folks aren't getting the proper care there. You just kind of can identify sometimes a submissive or fearful or a hopeless demeanor in the individual. If the person is young and involved in prostitution, that's a big red flag. If the person is young and using drugs, if the person doesn't have a cell phone in this day and age, these are some of the red flags that we would look at. And they're empirical things that you can see and note. And taken, one in and of itself doesn't mean that you have child sex trafficking occurring, but taken together, a number of them can be an indicator. So what to do about it? Well, you don't want to confront people on your own. This can be both dangerous and unhelpful. to the victims themselves. What you want to do is report it. The best way to do that, you can either pick up a phone and call, or file something even anonymously on the internet. And there's many options to do this. There's lots of numbers to call, lots of nonprofit organizations that are very good to take this information, lots of websites to report. But I'll throw a couple out there for your viewers. One is the National Human Trafficking Resource Center, and their phone number is 888-3737-888. And then there's also the humantraffickinghotline.org. So it's all together, humantraffickinghotline.org, where you can file a report, include your information, and that can be done anonymously. So that's really the basics of what I wanted to share with your viewers on kind of the severity and the importance of the issue and what we as society members can do about it.
Wow. Before Etty asks you the first question, I just wanted to ask you, I know you mentioned that you have to have a few indicators to be suspicious of child exploitation, but given the state of homelessness in California, you see many households with double, triple occupancy, and given the fact that people are homeless and don't have money, they might not have a cell phone. So how can we differentiate the two?
Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. I mean, I would say that any indicator by itself is probably not sufficient, but knowing what they all are helps us look and identify patterns or a number of indicators that taken together might warrant a referral. And it doesn't mean that when you make a referral that, you know, that you're setting in motion the dominoes of some kind of horrible outcome for someone.
And when you say referral, do you mean to a number you're going to provide for us, or are you specifically saying like a referral to DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services?
Right. So there's a number of agencies, entities, nonprofit organizations that will take information of suspected child abuse and do things with it. I provided a couple for your viewers that are used pretty pervasively, but basically the idea is just do something, right? The worst you can do is absolutely nothing, because that allows a problem to go unchecked. And if everyone does just like you and does nothing, then that's when the abuse will continue. But if you report something to whoever, either one of the numbers I provided, the number website or DFS or another government agency or nonprofit, maybe someone else will too. Maybe another person will too. And taken together, when you have the law enforcement agencies working with protective agencies and nonprofits, that's when the data starts to highlight individuals that need to be looked at and addressed, and hopefully victims saved. Mm-hmm. So it's not that one phone call is going to make that huge difference, but a non-phone call never makes a difference.
You know, before we go into the question, just recently, about 7 months ago, there was a group of girls that was in a local mall in the Valley. And one of the girls stayed on a bench, and two elderly women, very big, kind of told her to go out of the mall. Thank God she was with friends. They ended up leaving her alone because their friends approached. And you know, when they went to security, they almost said that the security kind of worked. They felt that some of the security people worked with them because they just wouldn't take a report. They would not take a report from the girl. And they tried to corner her to leave the mall. And when Karen told me about you, it triggered that story about the community. Somebody in the community mentioned it, and I'm like, I bet that's how they do it. They approach kids that they think that they're by themselves, and they target those kids. I wanted to ask you, just a few days ago, the FBI rescued 33 missing children in the operation called Los Angeles. The article I read brought me to tears. But I was shocked to read that it's not uncommon for the victims who are rescued to return to commercial sex trafficking, either voluntarily or by force. And many of the victims may not self-identify as being trafficked or even realize they're being trafficked. From your years of experience, can you explain why victims will go back? And, since the law that sometimes it's by force, how can those people find the victims that were recovered and approach them again?
Right. It's a huge issue, and some of it relates to how they fell into these situations to begin with. Sometimes it's done with drugs. Sometimes it's done with false romance. But basically, when you're the recruiter, when you're the person looking to target and develop someone for exploitation, you're looking for somebody that has a lot of problems and absence in their life, so that you're offering them something better. So even though what you're offering them is horrific, in the eyes of the victim, it might be better than the situation that they're in. So we have victims that fall into these lifestyles, these relationships. They think that they're loved, they think that they're important, they think that they're cared for, and that is very attractive for a person that has had negative experiences before, or has a vacuous or painful upbringing.
Are you seeing a rise in cases because of the state of homelessness in California?
It's a good question. I don't have any data on that. We do know that the manner and means of recruitment of kids into traffic situations has definitely changed from person to person recruitment areas, like hangouts, like restaurants, even in front of schools. And with social media, a lot of that's transitioned to online mechanisms for identifying, targeting, and recruiting sex trafficking victims with our kids. So platforms will be used, and a lot of times our kids, especially the younger ones, they don't know any better, right? So they think they're talking to a 11-year-old girl named Sally, and it's really a 42-year-old named Fred. And I mean, because with social media, they don't really have that. Fortunately and unfortunately, they're still naive to how devious folks can be.
This is the great danger. Yeah, because some of them go and meet the perpetrator. They'll go and meet them after communicating with them on social media. I saw videos where they actually went to meet the perpetrator. And sometimes the parents were in the back of a van with the federal agents, seeing how their child went to see a complete stranger and actually got into the car. But it was actually an agent, an undercover agent, that attempted to coerce them into the van.
Right. Yes, it's horrible, and it happens all the time. And we kind of hear these cool law enforcement stories. I've been part of some of those operations, and they're nice, especially when you pretend to be the kid, and then you can lure someone to come and get you and do a sting operation, and they go to prison for a long time. And it's all very satisfying until you realize that's 1 out of 1,000 that you're catching. And it's so pervasive, and so many people are being hurt by it that we really need a better solution than kind of the cool police sting.
I have to ask you, for kids that are coming from good, stable homes, would you say that the reason they got into the situation was lack of parent supervision?
I don't know if you could really use such a wide brush to paint the reasons. There's always a different set of contributing factors as to why a child ends up getting recruited and falling into these things. I would say generally, in their mind, what they're leaving is worse than where they're going to. So just because you might have an affluent upbringing doesn't mean you're not going through pain as a child or dealing with some things that are really hard to deal with, right? So it's easy to think that poor kids have it worse than rich kids because they don't have the means and all that. But kid is a kid, and sometimes they're hurting, and sometimes they're in a bad way, and these make them susceptible often to the type of recruitment we're talking about, so they can fall into being a victim.
Mr. Stern, it's estimated that 9 million cases of child abuse and exploitation are reported every year in the US, and 215 million children around the world are engaged in child labor, with 115 million of these minors working in hazardous conditions. And according to my research, more than 80% of child abuse and exploitation perpetrators are between the ages of 18 and 44. And the FBI considers human trafficking modern-day slavery. Can you let us know with a little more detail who is most likely to be a victim in a little more detail, and how are the cases initiated and resolved?
So a couple things there. First, who's most likely to be a victim are the folks that are vulnerable. So those are kids in the most desperate situations. The FBI has worked on cases of parents even selling their own children into these things. So financial motivations on behalf of the parents. Also drugs and other factors like that. Sometimes the parents are also perpetrators of other victims. There's a number of different contributing factors as to how someone becomes vulnerable and susceptible to being thrown into sex trafficking as a victim. Nobody is absolutely safe or excluded, but some folks are higher risk when you start talking about especially countries with extremely desperate financial dynamics, and then you have the influx of people, bad actors from other countries that have money. These things happen, and we look at countries. I worked for a couple months in Cambodia, and the top crime was child sex tourism, and this is what you had, and these are the cases we worked, where you would have folks from the U.S. Flying to Cambodia specifically to target and engage in child sex. That's a crime, and we would work with the Cambodian National Police to put them in prison. And we had, I think when I was there, it was just over 30 Americans in a Cambodian jail waiting for extradition back to the U.S. For these crimes. And again, with how pervasive this problem is, you're never going to address it all that way, but by making prosecution examples of folks and the word getting out that this will happen if you engage in these things, it's hoped that that has a deterrent effect, right? And we have similar relationships with and programs with the U.S. does with many countries around the world where you have vulnerable victim sets.
I have to ask you, did you ever work in a country that the authorities kind of try to ignore it or try to pretend that it doesn't exist? And,
yes.
And it's very frustrating.
So we enjoy a very low level of public corruption in the U.S., especially among our police forces. relative to the rest of the world, we're pretty well off. I think in the last ranking I saw, the U.S. was number 12 globally as far as our public corruption rates, which is a good thing. When you're working with other countries where police are paid, $3,000 a year, corruption tends to be more rampant, and you have to engage the dynamics of that government and of those police forces, and also abide by your own countries. So the U.S. has rules on what we will and won't tolerate when working with other governments in order to, affect lawful cases and arrests. And it can be a challenge. It is a challenge, but it's an important challenge to take on, because the result is having a lawful deterrent effect against a really horrific crime. And these things cascade, right? We talk about these horrible things we're dealing with in other countries, but they're also happening in the US. So by raising that bar globally on the minimum tolerant level, it's also helping us here.
When I read your biography, I read all your line of work, I was so impressed. I was reading it to my husband and to my kids. And it was very impressive to me that somebody who went to really good schools, you went to Berkeley, you went to USC, and you decided to become a public servant. Like, you could have done anything with your life, any career. I wanted to ask you, as a mother, I was thinking, oh my God, how does he do this? How did your line of work affect your parenting, affect you as a parent? And how can one come home after work? Usually you go, oh, leave the work at the office. But with you, it comes to human life. Can you ever leave your work at the office? I mean, how did it affect your overall life? And why did you choose to do this?
These are great questions and great points. I'll start off by saying I don't regret a minute of it. I've had such a fantastic experience living in so many different cities and countries, and being able to do such cool, important stuff. I'm really thankful to the government for allowing me to do all these things. And it's true, I went to neat schools, Berkeley and USC, but the government paid for that too. So it was all part of a program where, the IRS, for example, paid for my education at Berkeley on an agreement that I would work for them for a number of years after I graduated. And that was similar with the FBI and USC. I think these programs are so fantastic, so valuable, and I wish there were more of them, because I think it's a really good mechanism for attracting folks to be civil servants and to get more people in to these professions that serve our population, right? But that said, at the FBI, working in Honolulu, from there, running our efforts in Pongo, and worked in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand.
Wow.
MOAs, San Francisco, then off to DC for a couple of years.
And your family moves with you to all this?
Wow. Yeah, it would move and grow through the course of all of this. But
do you have adult children or?
So I have 4, and they're 11, 13, 15, 19.
Because the movie Meet the Fuckers was trending, on cable, and I knew you were coming on, and I thought of you, and I'm like, when your daughter gets married, it's like in the movie. I could just see you investigating Gaylord or whatever his name was.
Are they intimidated to bring people home?
So I have 3 of the 4 are daughters. And
Oh, wow.
one brought a boy here a couple times.
Oh,
I try to be very receptive.
You get on your secret bat phone and you call DC
yeah, the
and
secret room.
investigate everybody.
I definitely, I try to watch that. I could probably do a better job of it as a father, but in doing the work that I've done, I tend to be a bit cynical, right? I tend to deal with bad people when that's your job, and you tend to unfortunately see the bad in folks, and you have to work it, reminding yourself of you're dealing with the less than 1%. Is 99% people are good, and you have to
Right. But when your daughter tells you, Dad, I'm going to the mall with my friends, I mean, you must sit her down and give her like a 30-minute lecture, like about all the things that could go wrong in the mall and who to talk to, who not to talk to. I mean, I'm sure you've had that conversation with them, correct?
Ken, we could have worked for the FBI the way we do it.
We try to work a lot on making good choices, right? So
Right.
we've tried anyway to get them to make good choices on their own, and then look at the effects, even from a small age,
Right.
instead of to decide for them. But yeah, I look at it. Is it hard for them? Is it better? You know, I've dragged them all over the world, right? I've taken them to live in London and Amsterdam and Palm Beach and Vegas, and for the most part, I think they had a really good experience. They liked it, and they got to have some friends that they would have never had otherwise, and learn some cultures.
Right.
Do they keep in touch with the different friends they made throughout their lives in different places?
They do, more so with the older 2. So the older 2 have friends in London and the Netherlands.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of neat, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
have
That's great.
friends in Holland and all that, and
Yeah.
kind of cool. And I'm glad they enjoy it, right? We definitely worried about that. You know, are they going to have some issues because they don't have any lifelong friends? They don't really have a city to call home. We've never lived in one place for more than 3 years.
Wow.
So, you know, we've worried about that a bit, but so far they seem to, you know, knock on wood, have adjusted pretty well to it and have kind of enjoyed it. I got them asking me, I've been here 2 years. They're like, where are we going to next? I'm trying to explain to them, yeah, I've kind of retired. So that's why the phone doesn't ring every night anymore.
Oh.
We're in a different place.
You know why I asked you this question is Berkeley has a program where the FBI recruits for like summer program. They have like a summer internship program, and she comes and it's her first semester, and she goes, you know, I might apply to. I'm like, you're not going to work for the FBI. You're not going to do this. And she's like, and then I read your resume over Shabbat dinner, and I'm like, she's like, you know, you're interviewing him. Ask him why he wanted to do it. That's exactly why I wanted to do it. But as a mother, it makes me very nervous, you know?
Well, yeah, I remember it made my mother nervous. She was a school teacher, math school teacher, and lived her whole life in LA. And the whole idea of, she just thought
That's
it was
me.
kind of crazy. Why would you want to go anywhere else but here? And why you're carrying a gun, you're dealing with dangerous things and
That's exciting.
bad people. Why do you want to do something like that? But
Right.
yeah, if you do, you do. It's
Right.
most of us say in the FBI, it's, you know, for us, it's not a job, it's a calling. You know, you're kind of brought
That's
to
the
it.
truth.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
do it.
So, Mr. Stern, I wanted to, we couldn't end our interview with you without talking about Jeffrey Epstein, of course. The revelation about the billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, who was accused of sex trafficking girls, you know, painted a grim picture of sex trafficking in the U.S. The buying and selling of human beings is strong in America. As we know, this more than 100, not more than 150 years ago, since the end of the Civil War. Have you seen this? Can you tell us, how did he get away with it for so long? Really, I mean, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, and even Alan Dershowitz were reported to be on Little St. James, which was the island that Jeffrey Epstein purchased, and which really became the site of some of his most notorious crimes. And really, no one saw anything wrong with this picture. And we want you to talk to us, Yentas. Tell us, how did they get away with this? How did this happen?
It feels so wrong in the American culture for us to think that if you're rich, you get away with it. It doesn't seem right, and most of us reject that. You're like, no, that's other countries. That's not us. If you do something wrong, you're going to be punished for it. It doesn't matter if you're broke or you have $1 million in the bank. That's a standard we expect. We expect everyone to hold that in our law enforcement and our prosecutors and our politicians. Unfortunately, it doesn't always hold. And I fear that was part of the problem with this case. Maybe not directly, where you would have bribes being paid and bad things happening that way, but I have to think that indirectly, monetary influence, pressures had something to do with deteriorating the merits of the case such that it would end up being resolved in the manner it was in Florida. And that was a very much a conviction that was seen as a slap on the wrist. And that's, all of us, by us, I mean, the FBI agents that are familiar and worked with that case had that same feeling. This is wrong. This isn't right, but it was the process. As investigators, you gather the evidence, you bring it to a prosecutor. The prosecutor works with defense and negotiates a deal or goes to trial. And they have that discretion, and that's what happened in this case. I think we saw the U.S. Attorney, Alex Acosta, paid some price for that later for how that case was resolved. I don't know if it's going to get looked at more. It bothers me.
Of course.
I got to run our office in Palm Beach. I got there just after the case was settled, I guess. So it was kind of done by the time I got there, but I still had to deal with the employees and see the folks and work with the folks that weren't happy about how things were going.
Wow.
And
I
shared
think
that.
the traffickers, the people that are committing those crimes, are they mostly very rich individuals, or what kind of course, obviously, excuse my language, scumbags, but do they hide their identity? For example, with him, he was rich, he was giving lectures. I think he even bought a building. He donated a lot of money to Harvard. If I read correctly, he showed up to Harvard and listened to lectures. It's like in an environment that you would not think that those type of individuals who are educated will do it. You don't see it like that. Are most of the traffickers themselves, are they educated and have money, or who are those people?
I would say the majority of traffickers and organizers are not, a couple of things. One, they don't have sustainable wealth. They have, maybe day-to-day cash, and there's commingled illegal industries going on with child sex trafficking, adult sex trafficking, drugs, money laundering, and other crimes occurring. what you have with a wealthy individual perpetrating it is a couple things. One, you have sustained wealth, which is very different from day-to-day wealth. And you also have establishment. You have folks that are held in regard by society that then abuse that trust in and of itself to say, I can get away with A, B, and C just because I can. And those two are what you saw to the extreme, really, in this case, right? So with Epstein, you had someone that was very, very wealthy long-term and had that establishment status, living on Palm Beach Island, right next to where the Kennedy estate was. And this in and of itself was a power that was abused.
And his own private island.
Buying private islands is not real uncommon for the billionaires. I think Bahamas has like 10,000 islands, and a lot of the wealthy do buy islands and stuff. It's what you do with them that's problematic, right? So by buying something ostensibly outside U.S. jurisdiction to hide and conceal your bad acts, that's pretty bad.
Does law enforcement ever go to these islands, randomly to just check and see what's going on there?
Well, if it's outside the U.S. jurisdiction, you'd be talking about, whatever country's police has them, and that's part of the attraction. It's also part of the risk. We've also had wealthy people in these jurisdictions without U.S. oversight, but it's also without U.S. protections, and you're susceptible to, pirates, if you will, or other kind of crimes. It's really hard to be protected from. We have wealthy people do go to places, other jurisdictions where they feel their chance of being caught would be less.
What happens to the 30, for example, for the 33 kids that they just rescued, what happens to those kids and how are they treated in terms of psychological help? Is it very hard for them to go back to normal life? What is done once they're captured?
So once someone is designated a victim to a federal crime, there's a process. U.S. attorneys' offices have a victim witness coordinator. The FBI has victim witness folks too, and their job is to ensure proper services are rendered to the victim for a couple of reasons. One, so that they're cared for moving forward, and two, so that they're stable as a witness in the criminal proceeding that is going to take place. And that it's fairly structured how that occurs. Usually you work together with nonprofit organizations that are established in order to get the victim the help that they need. But if you're wondering, is their life guaranteed to be fine forever? The answer is no. Sadly, as you noted earlier, a lot of victims fall back into the life that they were rescued from. A lot of them don't feel that they were rescued. They feel they were taken away from something that they know. And that's probably one of the bigger tragedies of it all.
In all your years of service, have you ever followed up with any of the victims years later where they grew up and turned their life into something very positive and spoke to you and shared their life with you and are making a difference for other children?
So one of the better pictures I got is from a few of the victims that were rescued from a human trafficking case that I worked a long time ago. So this was it's one of the biggest human trafficking cases yet prosecuted in the U.S. and was Kil Soo Lee, who in American Samoa ran a sweatshop with about 240 Chinese and Vietnamese mostly girls that were held there and forced to sew garments that ended up being sold mostly to J.C. Penney. And they were beaten and they were starved, and it was horrible. And the FBI ended up going down there with other agencies. We arrested Kil Soo Lee, who was the owner operator, and then worked to deal with the victim witnesses along the lines that I was mentioning. So we actually ended up paroling over 100 into the U.S. proper from American Samoa as a trafficked person. It's a type of visa, T visa, where you get a special permit to be in the U.S. when you're the victim of human trafficking. And they were cared for in the U.S. and also participated in the trial of Kil Soo Lee. And I remember getting long afterwards, getting a nice photo of a few of them that they were like on the beach in Hawaii, walking, very happy, enjoying a life that they never thought they would be able to enjoy. So I don't know what they ended up doing long term, and I haven't been able to keep up with them now that we're 20 years later. But yeah, it was nice to see a glimmer of hope, right? Yeah. That maybe the U.S. did right by some of the victims that it helped rescue from a horrible situation.
Last question before we wrap up, I want to ask you, is there one case that you can reflect on that impacted you a lot stronger than any other case that you ever worked on? And can you elaborate on the case?
Sure. I mean, it's probably that one, right? This one was this Kil Soo Lee case. I was the FBI agent assigned to American Samoa. Oftentimes, over the course of 5 years, I worked mostly public corruption and fraud issues. For those that don't know it, it's American Samoa is a U.S. possession that's 2,500 miles due south of Hawaii, in the heart of Polynesia, has a population of 70,000 people, and it's only 76 square miles. So it's a very isolated and small area. But I was the agent assigned there, and I would often go down myself to work on these complaints and matters. And during the course of that work is when this Daiwusa, this garment factory, came up. So I was able to work that from the beginning and then all the way through to trial, and then also dealt with some of the facilitating issues in American Samoa. So that addresses kind of the fraud and corruption that maybe allowed this horrible thing to take place. But just knowing we had 240 victims that they were brought in from other countries, with China and Vietnam, they would be fed 4 chickens and 10 pounds of rice, and that was the daily diet. When we liberated that camp, it was barbed wired, guard gated. When we went in, these victims, they were emaciated. They had scabies, skin disorders. We had some tuberculosis issues, lice and things, and it affected me because it's America, right? It might be a corner of America. Maybe not a lot of us go there, but it is a United States territory, right? And this happened there, and that's not okay.
You mentioned J.C. Penney. Did they assume any accountability for any of what transpired?
Yeah, there was some financial stuff that happened after the fact that wasn't involved in the criminal case, but they were, without getting into the details of what they knew or didn't know or should have known, that's who the clothes were getting sold to, a lot of them anyway.
It's funny because my husband does, for many years, brand licensing. And after that case, a lot of the celebrities that have their lines started individually flying there. We check everything now. Everybody, and a lot of the branding moved back to the U.S. because of that case. They don't outsource it to other countries because of it.
Really? I didn't know it had those types of long-lasting.
So a lot of the people that we deal with after that case just started using American companies. So
well, this technically was an American company. I mean, that's part of.
Oh no, but I'm saying American companies in the U.S. that are kind of will be held more accountable for their actions.
Sure.
So.
Well, Mr. Stern, I wanted to say what an honor it was for us to interview you today on Yentas in the City. You're an accomplished individual with a vast knowledge in child exploitation. The world needs more people like you who have dedicated their lives to public service. Thank you so much for joining us and bringing us awareness to this very important subject. For viewers, if you are a child, parent, foster parent, friend, or neighbor, and you notice the signs that a child or foster youth is being exploited, please report it immediately to 1-800-540-4000. That's just one of the numbers you can call. We will be happy to post some on our site for our viewers to call other areas, to obtain help if they need to. We would like to thank all of our followers for listening to this episode. Please remember you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Yentas in the City. You could also write to us at dearyentas@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you and answer your letters on our weekly advice column. We would like to thank our sponsors, Soft Smart Systems International and Conquest Realty Investments. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We have a lot more coming. This is Karen Cohen and Etty Elkis, and we are Yentas in the City. Remember, be the Ruth in the room, which means do the right thing. Stay safe. Thank you.